If you are playing the French defense with the black pieces, this video is a must-watch video for you. Today we are going to discuss the French defense advanced variation with the black pieces and going to discuss something very interesting ideas that I have personally came up with. So this video is going to be very interesting to watch, so I don't want to waste any further time, so let's quickly start. So we are playing with the black pieces and white starts with 1 e4. We play the move e6, also known as the French defense, d4, d5, and here we have the move e5, the advanced French. And here we play the move c5, c3. The idea is pretty simple. We are striking in the center, trying to create a weakness on the d4 pawn. We play the move knight c6, knight f3, and here the most common way to play is to play the move queen b6. But after queen b6, there is a particular opening from the white side that black actually finds hard to deal with it, which is a3, and one of the most interesting variation to play with the white pieces. And after a3, c4 is the line, but I don't personally feel that it's still the best for black. So after c4, white can easily achieve a draw because after knight d2, rook b1, just play b4, and white will simply trade all the pieces and white will be happy to have a draw. So at the place of getting simply a draw in this position, I recommend you, at the place of going queen d6, just try to go for the move bishop to d7, which is a very interesting move. And after bishop d7, what's the idea you must be thinking? So after bishop d7, I have taken 3 moves into consideration, which are the most playable move. Bishop e2, which is the main move, bishop d3, and a3 are the main move. So first, let's try to discuss what happens if your opponent plays the move a3 in the position. After pushing the a3 pawn, which makes sense, white's idea is to play the move b4. So here after a3, we play the move f6, trying to strike in the center of the e5 pawn. So after f6, I have taken 3 moves into consideration, which is e into f6, bishop to d3, and b4 in the position. So if white first starts with b4, just the normal idea, we can happily take on e5 first, d5, and now we can play the move queen to c7. The idea is pretty simple. We are attacking the pawn on e5, so bishop f4, and here we play the move c4, trying to lock the center and now trying to limit the f1 bishop. So after c4, white plays bishop e2, we play the move knight to h6, short castle, and here we play the move bishop to e7. You must remember, guys, after knight h6, if white tries to capture after takes, first of all, we are having the bishop pair, second, e5 pawn is a weakness, so black is already having a good position. So that is the reason, short castle, bishop e7, knight to d2, and now we can happily short castle in this position, allowing white to capture the knight, pawn takes, and the idea is pretty simple. Black wants to play the move king h8, rook g8, and try to put pressure on the king side. So black is having a very happy position. And instead, if white doesn't go for capturing the knight and plays the move g3 instead, trying to defend the bishop, we can happily give an exchange sacrifice followed by rook f8. Despite being an exchange down, we are having tons of compensation. f4 is collapsing. We can play the move bishop e2, bishop h5, because we are having the bishop pair, and black is already having a very interesting chances to play counter-attacking and aggressive chess. So this is exactly what happens if your opponent plays g3, eventually b4. So going back, what happens if your opponent goes for the move bishop to d3 in the position? After bishop d3, we can simply take on e5. And here, there are 2 ways for white to capture the e5 pawn, with the pawn or with the knight. If white captures with the knight, we can play the move knight f6, developing the piece. Short castle, bishop g6, attacking the e5 knight. And now white knight would be forced to capture the bishop, I would say, because the bishop defends the e6 pawn. Takes, and now white is having the bishop pair, where black is not having the bishop pair. But after queen into d7, takes, because black's idea is pretty simple. Black wants to take on d4, trying to create an isolated pawn on the d4 square. So after queen d7 takes, bishop g5, we can happily short castle. And now what's the idea of black? So after short castle, our idea is to threaten the f2 pawn. So after short castle, if white continues with normal knight to d2 variation, we play the move knight e5, attacking the bishop. Bishop goes back, and now already knight to g4. The idea is pretty simple now. There is a triple attack on the f2 pawn, so white must defend it. So bishop h4, defending it with the bishop, and now we already play the move queen to f7. And now the pressure is just too much on the f2 pawn. The only move to safeguard the position is to play the move knight to f3, where we can happily capture the knight. Pawn, queen takes, and already we can play the move knight to e5, moving the knight, capturing the pawn with the knight, and black is in the driver's seat, having a very comfortable position and a better position. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays knight into e5. If your opponent captures the pawn with the pawn, now the real fun begins. After d into e5, we push the pawn to c4 first, attacking the bishop, kicking the bishop back, and now we play the move queen to c7, attacking the e5 pawn with the queen and the knight. So bishop f4, and now we finally decide to long castle. And after short castle, we play the move bishop to e7. What's the idea? Developing the bishop first, knight d2, and now rook c8. Rook f8, attacking the bishop. And after something like g3, we can play the move knight h6. And now what's the idea? After knight h6, if white tries to capture this, we are already happy with this position. Just play rook g8 and push the h pawn. And after knight h6, the idea is pretty simple. Black wants to play knight f7 and play the move g5, h5, h4. And I know that you can easily win this position with the black pieces. Just launch a very powerful attack. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays bishop to d3. So coming to the main move, what happens if your opponent simply captures the f6 pawn? So after ef6, we can play the move knight into f6, b4 now. We can take on d4, takes, and now bishop to d6. And after bishop g6, black is already having a very comfortable position. d4 pawn is a weakness. We can play the move short castle, e5 is the idea, and black is already having a very fine position. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays a3. Going back, what happens if your opponent plays bishop to d3, which is a bad move. After bishop d3, we play the move rook to c8, allowing white to simply short castle, and now take on d4, cd4, and now playing the move knight to b4. What's the idea? After knight b4, our idea is to take the bishop on the d3. So if bishop e2, we can play the move knight c2, defended by the rook, and now the rook is hanging, and black is completely winning. So knight c3, developing the knight, take, queen take, and now simply knight to e7. Simply developing the knight first, bishop to e3, knight to f5, e3. Now the idea is to somehow advance on the queen side. We can first develop our bishop, rook to c1 trying to play on the queen side. We can simply take on e3, take, and short castle. And now what's the idea of black? How to continue? After short castle, white continues with rook c2, which makes sense. White wants to double up on the c5. After rook c2, we first play the move h6, trying to stop all the back rank issues that can come in the future. Rook c1 and already play the move a5. Somehow first chopping the move b4. To be true, b4 is not such a big problem because after b4 we can still play the move a5, trying to undermine the queen side. But still in this position, as we have developed all our pieces, we are full ready to play the move a5, stopping the idea of b4. And after knight b4 and knight b5, we can first trade off a pair of rook, followed by queen b8. Now what's the idea? The idea is pretty simple. King f2, we want to trade another pair of rook. And now what's the idea? After queen takes, simply knight c3, and now our idea is to play the move queen c6. And now we are going to unleash the power of the bishop pair against the knight. Because the idea is pretty simple. Black wants to play the move b5, b4, expanding on the queen side, and there is no way white is going to have a better position because of the bishop pair. The bishop pair is just too strong to dominate this particular chessboard, and black is already having a very comfortable position in the driver's seat. So that's exactly what happens if your opponent plays bishop to d3. So going back, coming to the main move, what happens if your opponent plays bishop to e2? After bishop to e2, developing the bishop at its optimum square, we play the move knight to e7 first, short castle, and now knight to g6. After knight g6, white develops with the bishop to e3, and now we play the move bishop to e7. Remember guys, white cannot capture the c5 pawn because e5 pawn is always hanging. So knight to d2, short castle, a3. So after a3, it looks like white has successfully completed his developed all the pieces, short castle, and white is pretty happy. And now he's playing the move a3. The idea is pretty simple. He wants to play b4 in the future. So we first play the move a5, stopping b4, and after bishop d3, putting the bishop at a very nice diagonal, I would say. Now we simply take on d4, cd4, and now we play the move bishop e8, a very interesting idea. What's the idea? After bishop e8, we want to play the move f6. But if I try to play the move f6 in this position, I'm always having this bishop into g6, which I'm not liking in many positions. So that's the reason first I'm playing bishop e8. And after rook c1, we now play the move f6, takes, because white is kind of forced to take, bishop takes, and now rook to e1. After rook e1, we play the move e5 now, simply striking in the center, takes, knight takes, knight takes, knight takes, and now bishop to f1 because the bishop was hanging. So after bishop f1, we can play the move bishop to g6, putting the bishop at a very nice diagonal, and black is already having a very comfortable position, because at the same time the d5 pawn is a liability and an asset as well, because the d5 pawn helps black to gain more space in the center, whereas in the long term this d5 pawn can be a weakness or the target. But at the same time, this pawn can also be a queen in the future. Let's see how. So after bishop g6, white plays queen b3, we play the move rook f7, defending the b7 pawn. So after rook f7, white plays rook c5, double attacking the pawn on d5. But now we play the move rook d7, a very interesting maneuver of this rook f7, rook d7, protecting the pawn, and the idea of black is pretty simple. Something like bishop g4, attacking the knight, we can play the move knight c6, just trade the bishops, and after knight f3, we can play the move rook d8, getting the final piece into the game. And now black's idea is pretty simple. Black want to play h6, just take care of all the back rank issues, and then non-stop try to push this pawn to make a queen. And then black is having a very interesting chances, counter-attacking chances to help black win the game. So this is exactly how you can play this particular French defense variation with bishop to d7 at the place of playing the move queen to b6. So you have successfully mastered the bishop to d7 variation. So if you learned anything new today, make sure to like the video, share this video with everyone, and make sure to subscribe to our channel if you are new to our channel. I'm going to come up with these interesting videos like this. So till then, stay tuned and keep watching OneShot Chess.